if you're easily scared, don't watch this video. Someone named Ember sent me the story, and she says that she just wants answers because she doesn't know what she saw this specific night. She says that she used to live in a small town in Texas. Her mom still lives there, her brother still lives there, and when she lived there, there was a very small man-made graveyard that she used to investigate all the time. She says she wasn't a pro or anything, she just did it for fun. She said that most of the nights while she was investigating, it was very quiet. Every now and then she would see a glimpse of something, but it was never anything crazy. She says that this graveyard is small but open enough that where you walk in, you can see the whole graveyard. She says she's walking through the trees, going towards the back, and she sees a woman standing off to the corner. She said that she was surprised because when she walked in, she kind of scanned the whole area and she didn't see anybody there. She says that when she saw this woman, immediately she felt heavy. Her heart sunk, and she said that the air immediately changed. Now, she says that this woman looked pretty normal. She was wearing a blue hoodie, some blue jeans, and in this specific small town, there is quite a few people that go to investigate. They go to do ghost huntings, and normally when you see somebody, you introduce yourself. You're like, hey, sorry, I didn't know that you were here. I don't want to interrupt you. Just common courtesy. So she introduces herself and she's like, hey, sorry, I didn't know anyone else was here. I'm sorry if I distracted you. Do you live close by? And she knew she didn't because she lives in such a small town that even though you don't know everyone, you know who lives there and who doesn't. She says that what really scared her immediately was the way that this person was standing, like her demeanor. She wasn't standing like a normal person would as far as relaxed. She seemed very tense, as if she was going to lunge at her. And she says that that is when this woman takes one step towards her, and instinctively Ember takes a step back. Like, she said they were staring at each other for a few seconds, and then this woman takes another step towards her. Now, Ember says that the way that the light was shining, of course you couldn't see her face. It was dark, but you can kind of see her silhouette. But she says that the only way that she can describe this is the feeling of prey, that she was being preyed on. So she finally shines her flashlight at this woman's face, or where her face should have been, and there's nothing. It's just smooth skin. She can see the indentations where her eyes, her nose, her mouth should be, but there's nothing there. Hell no. She immediately starts running, hauling ass to her house. She is booking it out of there. And she can hear this woman like running, like chasing after her. She doesn't live too far from this graveyard. She reaches her porch, she turns around, and this woman is gone. What's crazy is that you can hear her footsteps chasing her the whole way. All that was there was the road, the trees, neighbor's house, no sign of this scary looking person. She decided to go back the next morning while there was daylight. Everything was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. She never saw this woman again. She says that she never went back after that day. She ended up moving away about a few months after that. And ever since that incident, she never did any more investigations. She never did any more ghost hunting because she was afraid of what she was going to see. She says that she knows that most people are not going to believe her, but this is the truth. And she kind of wants answers. So if anyone has ever seen anything similar to this, if you can please leave a comment because she will be reading them. And honestly, she is brave because I would have probably died immediately. But anyways, thank you so much to Ember for sending me this spooky story. If you guys have any stories that you'd like for me to read, please send them via DM or email, and I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
You're like me and sometimes get freaked out when you look in the mirror because you think your reflection's not gonna mimic what you're doing. You might not want to listen to this story. Today I'm wearing all ghosties in little jars. These all got sent to me in my P.O. box, and I decided that I was gonna collect them and wear them at the same time. How cute! ASMR. Also, Ariana Grande really popped off with this eyeshadow. If it looks patchy, it's just that like it's meant for you to move around. It's not her fault. It's user error, okay? Is that a hand behind me? So this guy says that when he was younger, one of his aunts passed away, and it wasn't an aunt that they saw very often, but they did live in the same city. This aunt was never married, she never had kids, so when she did pass away, the entire family went over to her house just to help clean it out. He would see her during Christmas time, but she was always very quiet, very serious, and he did think to himself, like, he always wondered why she never got married or had kids and things like that. When him and his family finally got to the aunt's house, he noticed that a lot of their other family members had already cleaned it out very well. She didn't really have a lot of stuff, but she was very organized and had a lot of things like set in place. The things that were left over were like pictures of people that they don't really recognize, like they weren't part of the family. They found like jars with handwritten labels on them. It was just a little odd and very strange. He decided that he was gonna go into his aunt's bedroom and just start looking into her dressers, and when he did that, he did pull some stuff, and then he kind of heard a weird sound in one of the dressers, almost like if it was hollow. He carefully picked up the bottom part of the dresser and noticed that there was a little compartment hidden in there. Inside, he finds this bag that's wrapped around with red hair and leather. The oddest thing though was that leather part that was wrapped around the bag had his name on it. His full name, like not just first name, first and last name. And at first he's looking at this and he's thinking, what the hell, like why would this have my name? Because he wasn't the closest, nephew to her, not even like by a long shot. They hardly even talked. But then he was like, oh wait, this is kind of sweet. Like she thought about me. Maybe she wanted me to have this after she passed away. So maybe we weren't the closest, but she still had something to give me. Now he admits that he actually hid this thing that had his name on it in his bag because everybody had already like went through everything and divided it between families. And the last thing he wanted to do was give them something that had his name and belonged to him and have them share it amongst everybody else. So he put it away and didn't open it up until he went back home. When he finally gets home, he's still curious about what is in that bag and he decides to open it. Open it. And when he opens it, he says that it is this very, very old antique looking mirror, like a compact mirror, and it's all silver. He says that he thinks maybe it's worth money, maybe it has some value, so he just ends up putting it on his dresser and goes to bed. So as he's trying to go to sleep, he starts to hear this really strange sound coming from the restroom that is in his bedroom. He says it sounded like if somebody was knocking on glass. It sounded like somebody was knocking either in his restroom window or in his restroom's mirror. He gets up, goes to the restroom, turns the lights on, and there was nothing. There's no one. He thinks to himself, maybe I was half asleep, maybe I was dreaming, maybe I was hallucinating, so he just ends up forgetting about it and going back to sleep. So at this point, it's been a few days since the knocking, or as he likes to call it, him dreaming or hallucinating, and he's starting to notice something really weird. He always leaves the restroom door open that is in his bedroom, and he says that sometimes when the lights are just completely off, he swears that in the darkness you can still see a little bit of light in his room, and you could see the mirror inside of his restroom, and he swears that when he moves, his reflection is almost lagging. Sometimes he'll have like a lamp on in his bedroom which goes towards the restroom, and when he looks at himself in the mirror, his reflection lags, like it almost doesn't move at the same time that he does. Bitch, I would have only needed to see that one time to never go back in there again. He's talking about, I've noticed something weird, like weird things are happening. It would have only need to happen to me one singular time. Now he explains that it's not like this really big long lag, like he will move and it's just one time where it's lagging and not the rest. Like he'll be moving, okay, it's his reflection's moving with him, but there'll be like one little moment where it's not, a moment that is just very noticeable to him because it's not moving at the same time. Oh my god, I'm scared. There's a mirror in front of me right now. I don't even want to look in there. He admits that he wanted to record it with his cell phone because he knew nobody would believe him, but at the same time he didn't want to see it actually lagging. Like he's like, I can lie to myself. If I have it on video, there's no way that I cannot lie to myself then. He's still sleeping in that bedroom. And after a while, something else started happening. He would be asleep and he would be awoken, not by knockings in the mirror or window. This time he would wake up by voice of a woman calling to him in the restroom of his bedroom. He would hear it. It would wake him up from his sleep. But then when he would fully wake up and he's like, shit, there's a woman's voice, he said it would completely stopped. After this happening, he finally decided to tell his mom everything that happened. He took the bag with his name on it, opened it up, the mirror, and now he's experiencing some weird things happening in his room. He explains how his mom never interrupted him. She never laughed at him like he thought she would, because he thought she was gonna think he was ridiculous. When he finally finished telling her the story and everything that's happening, she just looks at him and says, "Get the compact mirror, put it in the bag, and bring it to me. But make sure it is tied up how you found it." He says that when he came back with the bag, that when he handed it over to his mom didn't even turn to look at it. She just grabbed the bag with the thing in it and she tells him, "Okay, now follow me." They end up going back to the aunt's house, the one that passed away, and he says that his mom made a hole in the yard and buried that bag with the mirror in it. That his mom put a really big rock on top of where it was buried, looks at him and said, "These are things that belong to your aunt. We have no business in this." He immediately knew that it was nothing good. He never asked anything further. He didn't want to know. He didn't want to ask questions. He only hoped that this mirror would stay in the ground buried and that nobody would ever find it, because he's afraid of what would happen if it were to be opened again. That same night, he finally rested. He finally got sleep with no interruptions. He didn't hear a woman's voice or somebody knocking on the mirror. He does say that sometimes he thinks about the compact mirror and if they buried it deep enough, because he is terrified, like he's scared of somebody finding it. He explains how his aunt's house had been for sale since she passed away. Until this day, they're unable to sell that house. They still have people go and clean it and just upkeep the house, but yeah, they have not been able to sell it. And the reason why he wanted to share this story is just as a warning, because growing up, his mom always told him, don't touch people's stuff. You never know what people are doing when they're not being watched, and this was one of the biggest lessons that he had to learn. My question is, what the fuck was she intending to do to her nephew? Like, what the hell? Why was it there? You know what? It was hidden, like it wasn't open. Did she maybe intend to do something to him, but she's like, yeah, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to do it yet, but when I'm ready, I'm gonna open that bitch up and you are about to have crazy fucking nights. Also, he's still very scared to look at mirrors because he thinks that his reflection may glitch again, but hopefully, yeah, that does not happen. But what do you guys think?
This is an Appalachian story, but it involves pretty much every terrifying thing that you could think of that could happen in Appalachia, and this one terrified me. So this guy grew up in Henderson Ridge, and he grew up knowing these rules. Don't whistle after dark, don't answer the woods if the woods answer you, and if you see something in the woods that looks almost right, go inside. Now, he didn't take these rules seriously until the fall his cousin Jess moved in. One day, him and Jess are patching a fence line behind the house when they both hear their names being called, like by the tree line. First Brian's name, clear as a hello, and then Jess's. Here was the strange thing. It sounded just like his mother, as if she was tired. The only problem was his mother was in town closing up a pharmacy. So he looks down at his phone, and then he looks at the driveway, and his mom's car is gone. So they're just sitting there for a second waiting for their names to be called. They're just waiting to see if this thing says anything else. So at this point, they tell themselves that it's just the neighbors fooling around. But the next night, something stranger would happen. So the next night, they're inside when they start hearing something pacing the gravel beside the porch. Slow, deliberate rhythm, like a boot heel, then a scuff, then a quiet. Scary thing is, his dog wasn't barking. He went and hid underneath a chair, and he was shaking so bad that his heels started to click. Brian decides that he's going to open the door because this dude is brave. So he walks over to the door and he opens it, but all he can see is fog. A week later, his cousin begs him to ride into town for a late shift. He says yes, and they take what's called the Ridge Road. No shoulder, tight turns, and deer everywhere. Just past this old sawmill, his headlights catch this shape standing in the ditch. Then the figure starts rising up onto the asphalt, and he said that this thing looked like a deer if somebody were to describe a deer who had never seen a deer before, if that makes sense. The legs were too long and they were bending the wrong way, and its head was cocked to the side. It just made him incredibly uncomfortable. It stared straight through the glass right at him, the way that a person does, and he swears this thing did not blink. Jess just whispers to him, "Don't say anything." Brian just eases around it, and then he looks in the rearview mirror, and this thing is taking 3 steps towards him, then another, then it just drops out of the light as if the road had swallowed it. He said for the rest of the ride, they were so freaked out they didn't even talk to each other until they got to Main Street. So after midnight, he drives home, and he drives down the same road, and his radio starts to fizz out, and it fizzes out normally where it does when he passes this rock cut. Right as the static rose, his mom's voice rose over it. She sounded calm and ordinary, and she said, pull over for a second. He said that he did, and his hand had already tapped the blinker when all of a sudden those rules rose up in his head. Do not let it get you out of the car, he kept thinking, and then the voice just stopped. It didn't repeat. 2 nights later, the mimicry got mean. He woke up at 3 a.m. to his dog's low growling under the bed. His house had this weird pressurized quiet that they get before a storm, except for the forecast was clear. Then a knock at the door, not frantic. 3 measured taps. He goes to check the clock to see what time it is, and it's 3:12 a.m. Then he hears another knock at the same pace. Then his mother's hushed voice comes through the wood and says, "Honey, open up. I forgot my keys." He was halfway down the hall before the details snapped in place. His mother never called him honey. She calls him kid like she did when he was 6 years old, and if she left her keys in town, she would have called him. So he just immediately stops moving, but then the voice tries again. This time it sounds like a singer flipping flat, like, "Honey, let me in. It's cold." This time his dog just starts going crazy. He's barking at the door. He's growling. He's snarling. So Brian goes to the kitchen window and he just lifts the corner of the shades. There's no one there. No shadow. Nothing. But then he hears it again. 3 knocks. He said that he actually answered and he said, who is it? But silence. Then a new voice, but a child this time, or like an adult aiming to be a child. It said, "It's Jess. I don't feel right." That's when he made a rule of his own. No one gets in the house after dark unless I see their face in daylight. So he says, "Go to the front door. I'll meet you there." Nothing moved on the porch, but the dog's hackles stayed up, and then he started counting to 60. No steps, no boards, no weight shifting, but finally from the wrong side of the kitchen, outside of the far window over the sink, his mother's voice again. He hears her say, "Don't make this hard." He didn't sleep a wink that night, and then later on that day, when the sun finally rose up, he walks outside and he checks for handprints, footprints, nothing. It doesn't even look like a raccoon was out there. 2 days later, Jess comes home from the diner, and she's completely shaken. I'm assuming this is where she works. She said near the rock cut where the radio normally dies, she had seen a shape in the road. She said it was in the middle of the road this time, though, and it was standing in her headlights, and it was super tall, taller than a man, but wrong like a deer. She says that its legs were bent backwards, and as soon as she eased closer to it, it cocked its head really fast towards her and just watched her drive by. She said she started to feel this pressure behind her eyes like a migraine was starting, and then her hands went numb on the steering wheel. She went 30 yards past it, looks back in the mirror, and it is gone. So he said that after this, they did what normal mountain people do, and they asked around without saying too much, and people had stuff to say. One man said that he had chased a lame buck from his garden a week before, but as soon as it got to the tree line, it started walking on 2 legs. Another woman heard her husband calling from her back steps while he was 2 counties away hauling cattle. And this is the creepiest one. A little boy from his church said that he heard his grandmother singing outside of a trailer. Only problem, his grandmother had passed away a week before. The next night around 2:40 p.m., the wind kind of kicked up a lot. It wasn't storming, but it was very windy, and his lamp outside went out. It went black. He was on the couch with his dog under his knees and in his lap, when suddenly he heard footsteps coming up on the gravel. First heavy, then light, almost if they were testing the weight like a human. Then it stopped 6 inches from the back door, and he said that he literally stopped breathing. The knob turned a fraction and then stopped against the lock deadbolt. He said a full minute passes, and then the steps went down again. First slow, then quicker, then like a scuff, like something pawed the gravel and then sprinted away on 4 legs. He said the next day when it turned daylight, he went outside to check to see if there was any tracks anywhere. And again, there were no tracks. One thing that there was, though, it was a scratch on his deadbolt. A thin crescent of metal shaved from the faceplate, like a thumbnail had pressed and dragged down. He said after all of this happened that his cousin moved away. He kept the porch lights on all the time. He lived a little differently. He says if you ask him if he believes in SWs, he'll tell you that he respects the people that those stories belong to and the land they come from. He doesn't use the word where it doesn't belong. He said maybe it was a mimic, maybe it was a haint, maybe it was a not deer. He said what he does know is it was mimicking the voices of the people he loved. He said whatever name you choose, remember the rules. Don't answer a voice where it shouldn't be. Don't let anything talk you out of your car on a lonely road. And if it looks almost right, go inside, lock the door, and wait for daylight. So what did you guys think about that story? That story is so creepy. First of all, what is it called when you see like people with their legs backwards? The fact that this deer's legs was bent backwards really freaked me out. Like that is scary. I don't know what that is. The mimicking, it sounds like a mimic, but then like I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how to answer any of these questions. This was so much. Has anyone ever had this much happen to them? Like, if you live in the Appalachian Mountains and you've had this much happen to you, please email me because I would love to hear your story because this is wild. I actually got this story off of R, put 2 and 2 together, starts with an R. But I thought it was super interesting and he swears this story is true. But I'm running out of time, so drop any thoughts, opinions, or anything else you can think of in the comments of what it may be, etc. But as always, please be respectful. And now on to my favorite part, which is the shout outs. ACC for random shit. I'm assuming that's account for random shit. That's so funny. Thank you so much for the comment that you left. You said that you love my stories and you watch them every day. I love that you watch them every day. Thank you so much for that type of support. It really means so much to me. Thank you for being a part of my community, and thank you for commenting and pushing my videos out, and thank you for watching my stories every day. That really means so much to me. I know I just said that, but I love hearing that. I appreciate you, and I hope you know how much I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. I hope to see more of you. I love you. Sarah Dag, you are so cute. You said that you love my excitement when I tell the stories, and I love that so much. You also said that my videos are a must before you go to bed. I love that because I listen to scary stories, as you guys know, before I go to bed. I love being that for other people. I am running out of time, but girl, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for being kind, and thank you for watching my stories so much. It means so, so much to me. I appreciate you. Love you. And I don't have time for the outro, but I love you guys so much. Have a spooky night. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Hey, mama. Now you got a lot of stories about voodoo and stuff, you know, and that stuff was way, way back in the day when it was like,
still is.
Yeah, so like that was back in like racism days. Did you experience any like racism when you was like growing up, or do you have any story like that?
Of course I do. I've been back in the Jim Crow days. When I was like, okay, like before our school got, before we got segregated to start going to school with the whites. Okay, I was going to a school that went from the 1st to the 12th. From the first graders and the 12th graders, we all went to one school.
Wait a minute.
And that school called Lincoln School. It was called Lincoln School. Still, the school is still there today. Half of the school,
The first graders and the 12th graders?
From the 1st to the 12th, we all went to school together.
Was it a real big school? Because that means...
it was a big school, like the 7th to the 6th through the 12th. Their school was like inside, inside the big old building, like upstairs, downstairs, and like from the 5th to the 1st grade, we were, it was still hooked on to the same school, but we had like other class long rooms that you could go in, from elementary. And so during that time, I was in the 2nd grade. And back during the Jim Crow law, back in the 60s, this was 1961. I was like 7 years old, and like I said before, I told you before that my mother was the only black woman in my hometown that would get on public assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, when you get on public assistance, they give you a Medicaid card to go. Your kids can go get their eyes checked, to go get to the dentist,
mm-hmm.
and see a doctor. And so I needed my eyes checked, for some eyeglasses.
Mm-hmm.
And so the caseworker, she came to my school, and she took me over to another town. I had to go to another town and get my eyes checked. So I went there, and after I got my eyes checked and stuff, so she told me, she said, "Well, Francis, we're gonna go get something to eat. Are you hungry?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." Okay, so she took me to this diner, restaurant. So we went up in there. We sat I sat up at the counter,
mm-hmm.
and I can still remember, because when you young and like me, well, when I was 7, I can still remember the stools. They were like black and red stools, mm-hmm. at the counter. So I sit up there with her, and so when the waitress came out, she looked at me. She looked at my caseworker. My caseworker was white, and she said, "Yes, can I have your order?" And so my caseworker, she ordered me a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate shake. And I can remember just as good. And she ordered herself a ham and cheese sandwich with a cup of coffee. So we sat there. After she took the order, me and the caseworker sat there. We was talking. And so when our food got done, she brought it back. She put the plate in front of me and gave my caseworker her plate of cheese, ham and cheese with the coffee. And as I was finna pick up my cheeseburger, she looked at my caseworker. She said, "She can't eat this in here."
What?
And then when she said that, I put the cheeseburger down back on the plate. And so my caseworker, she said, "But why not? She's just a little kid." And so the waitress, she said, "I don't care. She can't eat it in here. Take her out." And now I'm looking, out. And I feel my pride coming in now. Even as a kid, I'm selling. Even as a kid, my pride started coming in. I'm start feeling a certain way. And so my caseworker, she said, "Well, can't you put it in a doggy bag?" So, she went back and she got a bag, put it in, put the shake in the cup. And so my caseworker, she said, and then so after that, she put my food in a doggy bag. And my caseworker, she said, "Well, Francis, we're going to go out to the car and you're going to finish eating your food outside." So she put the food in the doggy bag, my shake in the cup. She marched me on outside. I got in the back seat. She said, "Well, when I get done eating, I'm gonna come out, and I'm gonna take you home." I'm looking at them like, instead of her, getting her food, coming out and sitting in the car with me to eat with me.
Yeah.
She went on back in the diner. And
She went back in the diner to eat her food and let you eat it by yourself in the car?
I sat in the car. I sat in the back. I didn't even eat it. I just said it there because my pride was hurt. Because I'm looking at but it was all white people up in there. But I'm looking at they got their kids sitting at the table with their parents and they eating inside. Why can't I eat inside?
Right.
And so I sat there for a minute. And I the thoughts was running through my head. I'm like, why can't I eat in there? I mean, what is wrong with me not? She not letting me eat inside the plate. So when she got done eating, she got in the car and she looked in the back at me and she said, "Francis, you haven't tasted your food. You wasn't hungry?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, had I known you wasn't hungry, I would have never spent my money on you like that."
Wow.
And now my feelings really hurt, And so she brought me home, and when I got out the car, I left the food in the back car. I didn't touch none of it. And so I came in the house and I told my mama and my daddy. Well, you know how your grandma was back in them days. She could cuss like a sailor. But anyway, so she said, "No, she don't be doing my baby like that." And so my mama, she said, "So she didn't even sit in the car with you to eat her food?" I said, No, ma'am. No, she did not. She left me back there alone. I said, I didn't lost my appetite then. I didn't even want it.
I would have lost my house too.
It's Veterans Day. I wanted to honor a friend by sharing his story. I've told this story before on this channel, but way before I started Spooky Scary Storytime. But I feel like it's one of those stories that sort of defined who I am as a person and what I believe about life and the afterlife, because I believe that it's possible for someone who's on the other side to maybe communicate with you. And maybe this will make somebody out there feel better if you've lost someone. But I really feel like this sort of set the framework for me now eventually doing Spooky Scary Storytime. But years ago I was working as a bartender in Chicago. I was in college and I was a baby bartender, so I didn't know what I was doing. It was an English soccer pub and I was working days because that was the only shift that was available at the time. And every day this old man would come in, and his name was Jim, and he didn't really seem to like me at first, but eventually I won him over. And every day he would come in about 11:15 in the morning and he would order 3 Miller Lights and 2 shots of Jameson. He always tipped like crap, but eventually he was always the only person in the bar, so we kind of became friends. I sort of won him over, and he would do things like go over to the jukebox and play what he called hillbilly shit. Told me how he watched Spanish television, even though he didn't speak a lick of Spanish, because he liked Latin women. And every day after he left the bar, he would go get lunch at this Mexican restaurant where he would order eggs and bacon, which you know, I don't know. So eventually I left the bar and we continued hanging out. I had his number. I looked at him as sort of a grandfather figure. Both of my grandfathers, they're veterans too, but they passed away when I was young, so I didn't really ever have this like older male presence in my life. And he looked at me, I think, as like a grandchild. I knew that he was from Kentucky. I knew that he was in Vietnam and he was a truck driver after the war, and then he had settled in Chicago and lived alone in a walk-up apartment, but he didn't really have anybody. And so I think we were both just kind of lonely and enjoyed each other's company. And so we would get lunch some days, we would get drinks some days, and sometimes I would take him back to his apartment so I knew where he lived, although I'd never been in there. Throughout our friendship, he told me some things about his life that he had done that he wasn't proud of. I didn't judge him, but I think he was just telling me as like, you know, a listening board. Like, I think he was just letting some things go that he'd carried for a long time, and I think it was sort of cathartic for him to be able to finally like release them. And he helped me a lot too. I was going through a really bad breakup, and it was nice just to have this figure that could listen to me and tell me that it really wasn't worth all of the attention that I was giving it, and like this man wasn't really anything. But anyway, life got busy. Sometimes he would do funny things, like he would call me and then pretend like he didn't know who he was calling. He'd be like, hello, who is this? Even though he had called me. Sometimes he would text me, he'd be like, hey, you little freak, you want to go get a Bloody Mary? And I was always usually down to meet him. But life got busy. I graduated college, I started traveling more, and I didn't see him as much. I quit the bar. We would still try to meet up whenever I was in town, but it became less and less frequent. There came a point where I hadn't heard from him for a few weeks, even though I had texted him, and he hadn't responded to me. So I ended up calling up to the bar where I worked, and I said, hey, has Jim been in? And they said, no, we haven't seen him. We're sorry, you know? And I started getting concerned. So after another week or two went by, I started calling the VA hospital. They had no record of him being there. I called the police station because going to jail seems like something that he may have gotten into once or twice when he was feeling a kind of way, but he wasn't in jail. I ended up even going to the Mexican restaurant where he ate lunch every single day to see if they had seen him, and they said, no, so we're sorry, like he hasn't been in a couple of weeks. I went to his apartment and was saddened to see, because it was winter and it was snowing, there was snow covering the walkway and all of the papers were piled up outside, and I just had this gut feeling that he was gone. And I sort of just accepted it, like at that point, that I would probably never hear from him again. I didn't know anybody that he knew. He didn't have any family. I just realized that there was no way that I would ever really find out if something had happened to him. And so it was sad, but it was like this realization as I got back into my car that like he was probably just gone, and that was probably the end of it. And so I got back into my car, and I remember there was static playing on the radio, and I was driving, and I was in this very weird headspace, and through the static cut out and mariachi music started playing, and I just thought that was so strange because it reminded me of him. I just had this gut feeling that it was like him coming through the static, and maybe that was like me and my grief. It's just a very strange thing to happen at that point. And eventually I did get a call from my bar, and they said, hey Ashley, like we're sorry, but somebody called the bar and they asked for you, and we told them you didn't work here anymore, and they just asked us to tell you that Jim has passed away, and that his service is going to be held on this day at this cemetery, which coincidentally is the same cemetery. It's a veteran cemetery that my grandfather is buried at. So I was like, okay, thanks, you know, I'll be there. And so the day of the service comes, and I get there by myself, and it's the Abe Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Illinois. And I get there, and there's this big building where they have like the information center. And so I'm in this building waiting for his service to start. And so I say, you know, I'm here for Jim's service. And they say, okay, it's going to be starting soon. You know, you can just wait and we'll let you know. And there's nobody else in there besides the guy that's working. And then this other guy walks in. He's an older man, and I'm thinking like this must be the guy that called the bar to, you know, relay the message that he had passed away. Like this must be a friend or something. And even though I had never heard Jim talk about any friends, really, I mean, the people that hung out at my bar knew him. There's probably going to be some people that see this video that knew him, but nobody, like, I didn't know of him hanging out with anybody else, right? But eventually the guy's like, okay, it's time. And I find out that he's the hearse driver, because there's a hearse parked outside where Jim's body's in the back. And so the hearse driver goes out, and I follow him to the plot where he's going to be buried. And they take him out of the back of the hearse. And what I didn't know is if you pass away and you don't have anybody to claim you, they basically bury you in a plastic box that is not unlike the plastic Tupperware box that you use for seasonal clothing storage or something. And so I saw that, and I was like, oh damn, like he didn't even have a coffin, you know? And so they take him out, and then there's all of a sudden I noticed that there's like soldiers in this pavilion and they're doing a gun salute for him. There's some chairs set up and I'm like sitting in the front row and I'm the only person there, and they're doing the salute, and then they come over to me and they hand me his folded up flag that they took off of the box that he was being buried in, and they give me that, they give me the flag, they give me the bullet casings, the shells, and they give me his cemetery documents. They thank me and I'm like, I didn't do anything, you know. Like I'm like getting like emotional telling the story because it was I was like bawling at this point. I was just so sad because I was like, he didn't have anybody, you know, like I was his bartender. But I still have his flag. I have it next to a picture that I took of him at the bar. I have a lot of photos of us and of him, but yeah, you know, it was just a friend that I lost, and I still never found out who called the bar to tell me about his service because there was nobody else there. I really believe in angels. Like I really believe that it was him somehow that got through and called the bar to let me know, because otherwise I still wouldn't have any closure. I don't tell this story a lot, but I feel like it's one of the stories that's important to keep telling, because if I don't tell it, there's nobody else that will ever know that he existed and was loved and was like a loving person. And I feel like there's a lot of people like that, veterans, non-veterans alike. There's just a lot of people that are just really, really lonely, and you don't really know how much of an impact that you can make on somebody's life just by being kind and like by listening to the stories that they tell you. I wish that my own grandparents were around longer so that I could have heard their stories, but I just wanted to honor him today by telling his story again. And if you've ever shared a story for Spooky Scary Story Time, like an elder story with me, just know that I really do value it, and I respect older people like so much. Like I said in the beginning of this video, like that friendship and that experience fundamentally changed who I am as a person and how I view people and how much I value kindness to strangers. And so I hope that you all remember that, like, no matter what you do for a living, whether you're people facing or non-people facing, like there's probably somebody there that could use a listening ear, and it costs nothing to just be nice to people. At least that's what I think that he taught me.
This is what ended up happening to my grandmother after she made a pact with las animas in order to become prosperous. In case you don't know what las animas are, or las animas del purgatorio, they're essentially lost souls that typically only come out in the month of November. According to legend, it is believed that if you summon them, or if you reach out to them and ask them for favors or like help, that they will grant you those favors in exchange for you doing something for them. The only thing is that once you make a pact with las animas, the pact is for life. You can never cut it off. My grandmother had recently gotten divorced and had become a single mother to 5 children. My mom being the youngest, she was about 4 to 5 years old at the time. Times were really hard. They couldn't afford anything. My grandmother was really struggling to put food on the table. Not to mention, she had never learned how to read or write, so education was a huge issue. Her biggest passion had always been cooking, so her dream had always been to have her own restaurant and to become successful that way. But no matter how hard she tried, like, everything failed. One night, in complete desperation, she decided to light a candle and summon las animas and ask for a petition for her to have her own successful restaurant. That this was her biggest dream in life. In exchange for every single Monday, she would light a candle to las animas, and she would say a prayer, and she would leave an offering for them. This is something that she promised to do for the rest of her life. After this petition went out, it was almost like everything in her life completely turned like the right way, and she started up her own business, which happened to blow up very fast, and she became extremely successful, so much so that she was able to afford to buy her own house. My mom and her 4 siblings were all in private school. They had a maid, they had a nanny, they even had a chauffeur in order to take the kids to and from school so my grandmother could focus on the business. Everything was perfect for them for a few years. Like clockwork, every Monday night my grandmother would light her candle, she would say her offerings, and she would say her prayers, and everything continued to go like up. Until she met her second husband, who ended up to be the biggest leech. He pretty much only saw her as like a meal ticket. She was successful and he wanted whatever she had, so he went ahead and kind of like weaseled his way into her life. Now believes that he must have done brujeria on her because he wasn't even her type apparently. But regardless, she fell in love and they quickly became like a family. Not long after, he ended up convincing her to sell her business and to move. While all this was going on, she became so, I guess, distracted that she forgot her promise to las animas of lighting a candle every single Monday morning. She stopped doing it. After that, it was almost like everything in her life completely went downhill. That marriage, her second marriage, fell apart. She ended up a single mother to now 6 kids because she had one with the second guy. All of the money that she had saved from like her business completely went down the drain, and she started off in square one, like
They were literally living in like a small little cabin. I believe they had like dirt floors. Like it was bad. No matter what my grandmother tried to do to kind of prosper again, nothing would work. Finally, she decided to go to a curandera who told her that there had been a curse placed on her life because of the promise she had made that she had now broken. The curandera went and cleansed her, but my grandmother says that even after the curandera cleansed her, like nothing ever really went back to the way it was. And she feels like even now, after all these years, mind you, my grandmother's in her 90s, her life has never really gone back to the way it was. She feels like that curse has followed her like for life.
Do you believe in vampires? Yes. Let's talk about vampires, because what the there's been TikToks of people telling stories about how they have met vampires IRL.
Let's talk about real vampires. Get cozy, because I have tea that I am going to spill. I'm going to tell you the truth about real vampires. What are real vampires? The different types of real vampires, how they feed, everything I know about them, studies that have been done on them. And lastly, why I don't just knock the belief in real vampires. Quickly, if you don't know, my name is Megan. I'm a paranormal investigator. Search the paranormal, folklore, cryptids, the fae, the occult, which has led me on my journey to my research on real vampires. So what are real vampires? They are not the same thing as vampires from legend and folklore. They don't turn into bats. They don't suck pomegranate juice from your neck. They don't have an aversion to garlic. And they're not immortal, at least not in the way that we believe in immortality. Real vampires are very similar to your modern day witch. And I will get into that further into this video. Real vampires are essentially everyday people who require subtle energy to survive. So they need more than food, water, sleep, a roof over their head. They need something extra, something like subtle energy. So how do they consume that energy? How do they feed? That's where the different types come in. One type that has been talked about a lot is the sanguinarians or sanguines. These are the real vampires that do in fact consume pomegranate juice. There is lots of different ways that they might feed. Some real vampires will actually use something like a scalpel and have someone who is their donor who consents to giving them their pomegranate juice, and they will use their mouth on that person's body to consume the pomegranate juice. It's hard to say all this on TikTok. That being said, there are real vampires who actually have donors that give them a good amount of pomegranate juice to last them a while. Those real vampires will typically freeze that pomegranate juice and then later put it in something like their tea. I'm going to stick with my Earl Grey. Then we have energy vampires, and these are real vampires that consume subtle energy. But there can be different ways in which they consume this energy. For instance, there are energy vampires who consume energy schmexually. They need to get down with someone in order to get that energy that they require. Then we have energy vampires who consume energy by doing something that is like a massage. It's similar to Reiki. Imagine that you as a person, you don't just have your blood, your bones, and your organs. You also have this energy within you. They take your energy. Many real vampires do have donors that they get this energy from, although some also do what's called ambient feeding. So the idea is that if there's a large group of people, there's basically leftover energy or kind of energy that sits on top of a crowd. A real vampire will take that energy into themselves. Real vampires are typically self-identified as such and as needing something like subtle energy to survive. There have been studies done on them, and I will get into that in a minute. In the vampiric community, consent is essential and is discussed thoroughly, meaning if they are going to be taking pomegranate juice or energy from someone else, they are close with that person or close enough that they are asking that person if they can take those things. It's mutually agreed upon. That being said, real vampires can be good, bad, or somewhere in between and neutral. They're people. Not all of them are going to care about consent. On the flip side, there could be real vampires who do not know they are real vampires and are acting instinctually to take others' energy. Another way that some real vampires feed is emotionally, and that is where things could get sticky in terms of being manipulative or things like that. Although I have met a couple of real vampires who did not care about consent, most of the real vampires that I have met and have spoke to in length really do value consent and are amazing people. Let's talk about some real studies that have been done on real vampires.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this man who unalived his wife and continued to sleep with her until people started smelling something weird. This was a story that I was told by my grandma, and it happened many years ago. So, my grandma told me the story of, she was basically advising me never to marry a controlling man, never to marry a manipulator, never to marry a self-centered man. Always date somebody that you see yourself getting married to for years and years, and marry somebody that is kind to themselves and to others and to you as well. So, my grandma told me that there was this man who used to stay in the same village as them, and this was the time when my mom and her siblings were still babies. Like, we were probably not even a thought as yet. This man used to isolate his wife. Like, she had a house that was way far from all the other houses, even though the yards are next to each other, but you know how big village yards are, and their house was very, very far from other people's houses. This man never allowed this woman to leave the house unless he was with her. She was not allowed to have friends. She was not allowed to attend Stockfells and all of those things. So my grandmother is like, eventually the husband befriended my grandfather, and that's when she was able to have access to the wife. So she noticed that the husband was very much manipulative, because there was a time where the wife was wearing something that was above the knees. It was not even that short. It was just above the knees. And they went to the shops. It was my grandma, that lady, and that man. And they all went to the shops together to go buy vegetables or whatever. Because remember, the wife was not allowed to leave the house without the husband. So they had to all live together, right? So they get to the shops, whatever. And I think the shopkeeper complimented the wife, and the shopkeeper happened to be a man. So he complimented the wife like, wow, you got really nice legs. You know, my wife struggles with pimples on her legs. How did you get those off? How did you get to remove them? You know? And it was not even in any sexual manner. He was just being kind and just also wanted advice to help his wife. The next thing, my grandma sees old girl is wearing long clothes only. Like, she never wears skirts. It's hot, it's cold. She's always wearing long skirts, long dresses and skirts. She was not allowed to wear pants as well. She's wearing long skirts and dresses, and these long dresses and skirts cover her arms. So my grandma asked her like, what's going on with you? Why are you wearing such long things and it's hot? And he's like, oh, you know, she laughed about it, but you know, you can tell it was serious, because she was like, oh, you know, my husband doesn't like me wearing short things anymore because he feels like men are looking at me, and when I'm wearing short things, men look at me. My grandma was flabbergasted, obviously. She was very much shocked, and she didn't say anything, you know, she just let it pass or whatever. Until one day, Miss Ma'am was doing the laundry and she was wearing a towel. So my grandma crosses the street to go to her. As she goes to this lady, the towel, I think, fell because she didn't really tighten it enough, and she was not wearing anything under. But that's not what we're focusing on. She was not wearing anything under, and my grandma saw bruises on this girl's legs. And she was like, wait, Ibo, what's going on with you? And this lady sat down and she cried and vented to my grandma like, hey, when she was she was in her like early 20s, sorry. Her dad married her off to this man, and this man was like low-key like way older than her, but that was not necessarily a thing back in the day. Nobody really cared about things like that. And she's like, her dad married her off to this man, and her village is really far from where they stay. She doesn't have money. Like, he keeps everything. He keeps her monies. He keeps this. She also used to open a shop she also used to sell sweets and stuff to kids at school. He used to take all of that money, so she was unable to go visit her family and stuff like that. And this man beats her. Like, he beats her to a pulp. She unlifts her shirt. She pulls her shirt up, and the head, the arms, baby, the arms, the chest, everything is just bruised. Mind you, as this lady's telling my grandmother all of this, this man allegedly was standing at the window, and he could hear everything that this lady was telling my grandma, right? And so she's like, remember that time when I wore that short like skirt where it was above my knees, blah blah blah. She's like, yeah, he beat me up that day because that man complimented me. Like, it was my fault that he complimented me, and after he complimented me, I could proceeded to speak to him like I was supposed to just be rude or whatever. And she's like, she's living in hell. My grandma decides, listen, like, I can give you money so that you can go back home, right? She's like, I can give you money so that you can go back to your family or whatever. And she's like, just go visit and then you come back if you want to come back. If you don't, like, then just don't come back, right? Sharp. Husband is hearing all of this, and he's listening to them planning and plotting for her to escape. Sharp. He doesn't say anything, right? A week or two later, my grandma accumulates the money, and she goes and she gives the girl the money. She gives the girl the money and they plan the escape. Mind you, when she was giving this, so this man basically was looking at her and what she was doing when it came to her interacting with my grandma, because he knew that she was planning her escape. So that day, I think it was nighttime, she was planning her escape, and my grandma never saw her again. So my grandma assumed that maybe she woke up in the early hours of the morning and she left. And because remember, the husband had heard what this lady was telling my grandma was telling this lady, and the conversation that they had, he obviously was able to come up with a story like, no, baby girl went back to her village and she went to go visit her family, blah blah blah. And my grandma bought that story, guys. My grandma brought that story and was like, yeah, sure, because she knows what they planned. So even if she doesn't come back, my grandma wouldn't really take notice of that. And also another thing, they don't know her family, the other side, so they couldn't really go look for her. But at the same time, it's like, because of the plan that they had, my grandma thought that she was in her village. 3 weeks go by, and there is a stream that is near this man's house, right? And people go fetch water there. And 3 weeks go by and people start noticing a smell. But they can't really point and be like, the smell is from that house, the smell is from that house, the smell. They really can't tell, but it's just a funny smell, When you're passing by that house, it's a matter of going like, just so you can understand where the smell is coming from. One time there was this man, I honestly don't know what that man was coming to do at that man's house, but thank God he went to go look for him, and he was not there. So obviously he knocked on the door. He didn't know he was not there, but now we know he wasn't there. So he knocks on the door and he keeps on knocking, and he can see that somebody's laying in the bed. So he goes around to the bedroom window to knock, because I don't know what the hell he needed. It must have been urgent, but he sees that somebody's laying there and the window is slightly open. As he pushes it open, he was met by the smell that was just horrible. And obviously he realized that, hey, that's not a body that's of someone that is alive. He calls the villagers, whatever, and they break the door and they realize that it's this man's wife, and the body was slowly decomposing because he had packed it with lots and lots of ice blocks, like meat that was in the freezer was on top of her, and there was ice on top of her, and this man was just crazy. So the police come, whatever, and the mortuary comes to pick the body up, and the man knows nothing. So as he's coming, he was walking back home. He didn't know that there was police at his house, and when he saw them, he tried to run, but people had already seen him and they knew that he could try something like this, and they took him and they put him in the police van, whatever. And the post-mortem report revealed that this person had been sleeping with this dead body, having sexual relations with a dead body. And because I don't know how, but they were able to determine that it's been a month or maybe a couple of weeks of her. She had been dead for a couple of weeks or a month. I don't know how this man was able to preserve that body, but she had been dead for a long time, and he continued to sleep with that body because obviously they found semen inside the. You know what? He did it. Men are cruel people, okay? They're just not. You know what? And I'm just glad that that lady got justice, even though it's unfortunate for her that And my grandmother does say that she felt bad because she was like, damn, I helped her plan an escape only for it to be her last day on earth. That man was a terrible person. This is why the death penalty needs to be brought back, so that you guys can learn your lesson and meet the maker and go and account for your sins. Because why? Just disgusting.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
This man is responsible for one of the worst mass killings in US history, and his story is equal parts disturbing and bizarre. This is the story of Richard Speck. This is Richard Speck. He was the 7th of 8 children. He and his siblings were all on the receiving end of a lot of verbal and physical violence at the hands of their stepfather, who drank a lot. Richard Speck started drinking at a really young age, and he was a pretty poor student. He was arrested for the first time when he was 13 years old, and he dropped out of high school when he was 16. When Richard Speck was 21, he married a 15-year-old girl, and they had a daughter together. The marriage only lasted 4 years. He was pretty violent towards her. Another thing to know about Richard Speck, and many professionals have attested to this, is that he's not the brightest crayon in the box. By the time he was 25, he was a divorced drifter who was addicted to alcohol, and he'd been arrested 41 times. And the arrests were over theft, fraud, and bar fights. But in 1966, his crimes escalated to rape and murder. He assaulted a 65-year-old woman while robbing her home, which brings us to the infamous night of July 14th, 1966. Here's what happened. That day, Richard Speck discovered that he didn't get a job that he really wanted. And feeling depressed and frustrated, he went on an all-day drinking bender. And that escalated into catastrophic violence. Just before midnight, he broke into this townhouse, which was shared by 9 student nurses. He said he had the intention to burglarize it, but on a whim decided to murder everybody in the house. The crime was described as unorganized, chaotic, and brutal. He threatened them with a gun and a knife, tied their hands with pieces of fabric, and locked them all in a room. Then he brought them out one by one to either stab or strangle them. And while he was in the middle of this crime, a couple of the women came home after their shifts, just to add to the horror and the chaos of the situation. And he wound up brutally taking 8 of these women's lives. But one woman survived. When she realized what was happening, one of the women rolled under a bed and hid there. Now, with most psychopaths, this probably would have been a fairly fruitless plan, but this is Richard Speck we're talking about, and he's a dipshit. Because he just lost count of how many people were in the house. This poor woman stayed under the bed for hours until the sun came up to make sure that Richard Speck had left. Then she freed her hands and called the police. Richard Speck went into hiding after the murders. But within 2 days, police had shown enough people the sketch based off of the survivor's description of him to identify the killer as Richard Speck. When police caught him, he tried to take his own life. He was brought to the hospital, and that's where a physician noticed his infamous tattoo that says, "Born to Raise Hell." So combined with the incredibly convincing eyewitness testimony, all of his fingerprint evidence at the scene, it took a jury only 45 minutes to convict Richard Speck of 8 counts of murder. He was originally sentenced to death by the electric chair, but that was later changed in 1972 when the Supreme Court found that capital punishment was unconstitutional. So his sentence was changed to serve 8 consecutive terms of 50 to 150 years. So he was on the hook for about 400 years in prison. He died in prison of a heart attack in 1991 at the age of 49. No one claimed his body, so his ashes were scattered unceremoniously by prison officials. But the story doesn't end there. In 1996, 5 years after Richard Speck passed away, this video surfaces. And it is shocking. The video's fucked up for many reasons, but high level, it's him and an inmate and someone off camera, and they are very casually talking about all of his crimes. They engage in intimate activity. They're doing illegal substances, talking about how much they love prison, and it also reveals how Richard Speck was able to survive in prison. So in order to stay alive, he transformed his body. You can kind of see it here, but he has developed breasts. And he was able to grow them due to illegal hormone injections that were smuggled into the prison. At the time, people referred to it as a queen bee. This video prompted lawmakers to investigate state prison regulations and corruption, because it's pretty inconceivable how this video is even made in a prison. Which, by the way, I think has been scrubbed from the internet. I cannot find it anywhere. The only thing I can find is a clip from another true crime show. But even though Richard Speck was living the latter part of his life as a prison bitch, it certainly doesn't seem like the punishment fits the crime based off of this video. His story is portrayed in American Horror Story. He's also portrayed in one of my favorite shows ever, Mindhunter, if you want to learn more.
For a man named Anthony who went to elementary school at Juarez Lincoln in San Diego. Anthony, if you're seeing this video and the internet has done its thing, there's a man named Jay who is trying to contact you because you guys were apparently friends and everybody else believes that you never existed. So I'm trying to help Jay out here. I realize that you probably have no idea who I am. My name's Ashley. I have a series called Spooky Scary Storytime where anybody who listens to the series can share their allegedly true, most unbelievable or creepy experiences. And your name came up, believe it or not. That's crazy. But Jay said that he has been thinking about you a lot because he realizes recently that he has a lot of false memories from childhood. It kind of started with him remembering this playground that he had in his backyard in the house that he grew up in. And all of his siblings and his cousins and his mom were like, Jay, we never had a playground in the backyard. And he was like, oh, weird. I must have misremembered that. But then it started getting stranger, and he would misremember a bunch of things, and everybody kept saying, Jay, you need to get your memory checked because that's not real. But he didn't think it would come to people that he knew, because people are real. People are solid, right? You can't really fake a memory with somebody, especially somebody you were friends with as a child. But Jay says that's exactly what happened with you, because he remembers you being really close friends in 4th grade. And you guys would always apparently skip out on class by saying that you had to go to the bathroom, and you just always would run down the halls and have a good time together. One of those funny, fleeting childhood friendships, but Jay changed schools after 4th grade. You guys lost touch. He didn't have your number. He didn't know where you lived. I don't really know what happened. But the last time he saw you was in 6th grade. He went to summer camp, and the summer camp he went to had schools from all over, and Juarez and some other schools in the area all went to the same summer camp. And so he saw you at summer camp. You came up to one of the tables that he was sitting at with another friend. He said, hey, Jay, do you remember me? And he was like, oh my God, Anthony, I can't believe it's you. I thought I lost touch with you. But then you guys lost touch again, sadly. And you know, life happens and people get older and busier. And sadly, Jay could just kind of forgot about you. It's nothing personal, I'm sure. But so recently he's been thinking about, you know, just the kids that he grew up with and his friends and stuff. And your name came up. And so he does stay in touch with some other kids that you guys went to 4th grade with. And he reached out to them on social media, and he was like, hey, does anyone have Anthony's socials? Because he's been wanting to get in contact with you. Every single person that he went to grade school with says, we didn't go to school with anyone named Anthony. And he's like, yes, we did. I remember him. And then I saw him in 6th grade. And one of his friends was like, no, we didn't. I remember everybody. And he's like, no, you don't remember everyone. And so this friend goes to her mom, who kept all her childhood yearbooks. And she's like, can I see the yearbooks? And she sends Jay photos of the yearbooks from, you know, 1st grade onward, or whatever grade onward. And there is nobody in the class named Anthony. He doesn't remember your last name, unfortunately. But yeah, if you are Anthony and this sounds familiar and you know Jay, comment. Internet, do your thing. Jay says he has no idea how it's possible that he has full-on memories of you, not seeing you just at that school, but also at summer camp. And there's also no record of you at that summer camp, by the way. He's obviously very confused by this, and I'm just trying to prove you're real.
Weird spooky story time, and you might think twice about moving into an older house after this. When I was in middle school, I slept over at my friend's house for the first time. Her family had just moved into this older place on the edge of town. It was one of those houses with narrow hallways and floors that creaked with every step. Her room was upstairs right across from the attic door, which already freaked me out. We stayed up late watching scary movies on her little TV, eating chips and soda till like 2 in the morning. When the lights went off, it was so quiet you could hear the house breathing. Then we heard slow, heavy footsteps coming up the hallway. They stopped right outside her bedroom door, and the doorknob rattled. I whispered, "Is that your dad?" And she shook her head and said, "No, he's working the night shift. It's been happening for the last week now." The footsteps lingered a few seconds, then slowly walked back down the hall. We started having sleepovers at my house after that. I think if I was spending the night at my friend's house and heard that, I think we'd have sleepovers at my house after that as well. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, or if you've ever experienced anything like this, send it my way.